New information about Roy Rodgers has been confirmed. When it comes to Western music, Roy Rodgers has had a bigger impact on Americans than almost anyone else. He was known as the King of the Cowboys, and he was in a lot of movies in the 1940s and 1950s. He also played country music for a lot of the 1930s. He was a shining star in America, and he's still looked up to today. Through these old pictures, we'll get a look at the life of a famous person. Success. Roy's rise to fame started with music when he was in a band called the Sons of the Pioneers. Since the radio presenter gave him a new name, they've become very famous. By the summer of 1934, they were known all over, not just in Los Angeles. They also got a music deal with Decca label in the same year. Roy was able to get into movies because of the Sons of the Pioneers. The Sons had a few small roles in movies as background actors, but Roy made himself stand out and got a few small jobs in Hollywood. Entry to film. Rodgers started to take his job as an actor more seriously, and in 1935 he took his first steps into the movie business. At the beginning of his work, he was often cast in small parts. In 1938, he got his big break when he tried out for Republic Pictures as a singing cowboy star. Rodgers got the part, and in 1938, in the movie Under Western Stars, he became a star. The movie was a big hit and helped him get into Hollywood. Film success. Rodgers quickly became well known after his first big show in 1938. With his unique charm and natural ability for music, he was likely the biggest fan of Western music. He was in movies like King of the Cowboys and Sons of Paleface, which were big hits. He was the best Western actor for more than a decade, until giants like John Wayne and John Ford took over. A man of business. Roy Rodgers was not only good at making people laugh, but he was also good at making money. He knew his own value. So in 1940, he made a deal that he would keep the rights to his name, face, and voice. This had some very important effects. He made a lot of money by making money off of his name and figures. There were toys, books, and action models with Roy Rodgers on them. Rodgers kept all the money he made from them. Emergence in television. Rodgers had already been a huge success in radio and movies, so he took on the field of television. He tried his hand at the Roy Rodgers Show, a Western TV show in which Rodgers played a cowboy who brought justice to the city. It was kind of like a Western Batman, if you will. The show ran from 1951 to 1957, and it still has a 7.2 grade on IMDb, which is pretty amazing. People from all over the U.S. enjoyed the show, which also featured his wife, Dale Evans, and his horse, Trigger. The flip side of the coin. Rodgers' work did not only have high points, however. Rodgers' time on TV was like a rock in that it went up and down. In 1962, Rodgers and Evans started making the Roy Rodgers and Dale Evans Show, 5 years after the Roy Rodgers Show finished. This show, on the other hand, didn't do well. It was dropped before the first season, which was a sign that Rodgers and Evans would no longer be at the center of Hollywood Western genre like they once were, and that their fame would soon fade. Trigger. Hollywood knew that Rodgers loved horses and that his best horse was Trigger, a Palomino colt he got in California. Trigger was in a few of his movies, and they both tried to be as famous as they could. Trigger learned more than 150 tricks and sometimes did better than Rodgers. They worked together on several movies like Song of Nevada and Rainbow Over Texas. My Pale Trigger, a singing movie, was even made about Trigger. Hall of Fame. Rodgers was well known in both the singing and movie worlds, so it was only normal that he'd be honored for that. At that time, he was one of the most well-known people in country music. Rodgers is the only person to have put into the Country Music Hall of Fame twice. The first time he was included with the Sons of the Pioneers, and the second time was as Roy Rodgers. Rodgers didn't stop at the Country Music Hall of Fame. He also broke rules in Hollywood. He received recognition from the Hollywood Walk of Fame, which awarded him 3 stars for his contribution to radio, movies, and television. Memorabilia. Roy Rodgers and Dale Evans were very well known during their lives, and there was even a museum dedicated to them. The Roy Rodgers Dale Evans Museum opened in 1967. Roy Rodgers himself gave a lot of the items in the museum to the museum. In Branson, Missouri, a Roy Rodgers Dale Evans Museum was set up. It had a lot of things from their lives. The museum finally closed in 2009 because fewer people were coming to see it. Becoming Roy Rodgers. Rodgers was born Leonard Sly, as we've already said. So what happened to make him Roy Rodgers, and why did he decide to call himself Roy Rodgers? To get the right feel, companies in Hollywood often change the screen names of stars. Leonard Sly started acting under the name Dick Weston, which was a fake name. When he first signed with Republic Studios in 1938, they gave him the name Roy Rodgers as a tribute to Will Rodgers, who had just died. Charity and public appearances. Roy Rodgers knew he was famous, but he never let it make him feel good about himself. Instead, he used his fame to do things like give back to the public through charity and public appearances. Rodgers was most famous with young people, so one of his best things to do was visit sick children in hospitals. He would even sometimes bring Trigger with him, who could go up and down stairs and move around on hospital floors. Food for thought. As we've already seen, Rodgers was a very smart and skilled investor who created a brand of merchandise with his name on it. But he wasn't just a toy and action figure maker, he also opened restaurants. In 1968, Rodgers gave the Marriott Company permission to open a chain of restaurants with his name on them. They were Roy Rodgers Restaurants all over the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic. There are still 48 Roy Rodgers restaurants in the United States. Sorrows under the smile. Roy's incredibly endearing and content smile was always noticeable in his photographs. People couldn't tell from his smile that he'd been through hard and dark times. As famous and inspiring as he was as a Western hero, he went through a lot of sadness and pain in his life, which often surprises people. His first marriage didn't work out, and his second wife died while giving birth. His children shared his troubles, which was sad. Losing your own child is a pain that can't be put into words, and Rodgers and Evans both felt this when their daughter, Robin, died right in front of them from heart failure. Riverfront Stadium. Roy Rodgers is well known, and so are the places where he lived. His family's first home was a slum building in Cincinnati, where he was born. Later, the building was torn down to make room for Riverfront Stadium, which is one of the most famous stadiums in the United States and home to the Cincinnati Bengals of the NFL and the Cincinnati Reds of Major League Baseball. Rodgers said later that he was born on second base as a joke. Death. Roy Rodgers died in his home in Apple Valley, California on July 6, 1998. He was 86 years old, and Dale Evans, his wife, and other members of his family were with him. In his later years, he had many heart surgeries, which along with his old age led to his death. He was known as the King of the Cowboys, and even though he's gone, he still lives on in our hearts. We loved him for his amazing acts, great singing skills, and strong personality. What now? The newest Roy Rodgers Restaurants location, which can be found in Cleveland, Ohio, will welcome customers for the first time on February 27th. The debut of these flats has been keenly anticipated as a direct consequence of the news made the year before about a deal involving 10 units with One Holland Corporation. The Western-themed quick-service restaurant that carried Rodgers' name and spread across the Northeast is now making its way back to the Midwest after having moved to other regions.